Good morning, everyone. I am Jeff Levin, one of the co-chairs of the Marblehead SEPAC, and I am thrilled to be here with Brian Oda to ask him a few questions about his candidacy for the Marblehead School Committee. Welcome, Brian. Before we jump into the questions, what would you like to tell us about yourself?
Well, first, I want to thank SEPAC for inviting me into this discussion. I think it's important to hear from the candidates directly. I've been a special education teacher in high school, middle school, and then I became an administrator on the Cape as a dean of students in the middle school, moved up the village as the assistant principal there, and then ended my years as the principal at Glover. So I have experience I think you won't find in most of the other candidates. The fact that I was a special education teacher and an administrator, I truly know how the system works. So with that, fire away your questions.
Love it. Thank you. So what would you say are the 2 or 3 most important issues that the school committee will need to address over the next few years? And what unique perspective or skills would you bring to help the committee address them?
Well, clearly the budget, because every year the budget is a problem. And we haven't had an override in many years and have had several defeated since I've been here. And I think that we need to look at why we don't get through these overrides. And I think part of it is long-range planning is not there. We need to take a deeper look at why the other overrides failed. We need to talk, if this one doesn't pass, and I am hoping it will because I fully support it, but if it does not pass, we need to get down to the nitty-gritty. I've been told since I've been in the district that we never get overrides, and that's it. That's all they ever say. I think that's the wrong answer. The answer is why. We need to get down to the level, the granularity, to figure out why voters reject it, and then begin addressing them so that if we ever have to do this again, we're not going to run into the same override issues. I think part of that means that we have to start looking very hard at the special education budget. I think it's not, it isn't funded enough. If you look at the programs and the amount of services we provide, I think it's always underfunded, which is one of the reasons why we end up with out-of-district placements, because we can't get enough people to support those in the greatest need. So the budget's definitely the key to everything. And unless we learn from our past mistakes and go forward, I think we're always going to have this problem. We really need to present the town with an accurate 5-year forecast and then go through it every single year, where we are against our forecast, how we did against it, why we're looking at more increases, how that affects special education, the quality of the programs we currently have, and the distribution of students within the schools to make sure that they're all equally dispersed. So I think that's the number one priority. The second one is communication. I know there's been a lot of work being done by the school committee to improve their communication with the public. I think that's a very important step. And the other piece is there's always been a bit of, how would you say it nicely? The school committee can dig their heels in on things, and we need them to be more open, and therefore we need to have more open communications with the public. I know that that's on the school committee now and part of the school committee public comment, but then the school committee always has the same mantra, no matter which school committee is, which is we don't respond to the comments. We'll take it back, we'll think about it, and we'll get back to you. So that's very key. If we're going to do that, then we need to set aside school committee time to address these very big issues. And
Thank you, Brian. Oh, I'm sorry. Please.
No, that's fine.
So I'd love to go a step deeper on budget. You know, as you noted, budget challenges have been a focus area for this town and for the schools for a number of years. And regardless of how the vote turns out, and I too would hope that it passes, it will remain front and center. And special education budgets are complex and are often unfairly kind of picked on or blamed for consuming general education resources. How do you feel we could build greater consensus in the community in terms of managing the budget in ways that support all of our students?
Well, again, it has to go back to long-range planning. I believe that currently the district tries to make sure that all schools have similar programs. I'm not so sure that that's the most effective way to spend money. You know, why would we have a program at one school when there's only a few students in there? Another school has a few students. So instead of taking those resources and putting them together so you have an effective teaching process, we split them. So you have double resources, which I don't think is the best way to spend that kind of money. So that would be one thing I would look at. I guess, well, yeah, I mean, you really have to think about how we support the most needed students. I know that inclusion is always a big question from the special education parents, and I firmly believe in inclusion, but you can't do it without the budget. You know, children with moderate disabilities can go into a classroom, work with the teacher, understand the work, as long as it's modified by the special education teachers. But kids with severe disabilities or very heavy learning or behavioral issues cannot go into these classrooms without support. And that's where the rub lies, because if you don't have the supports for the kids that need it the most, they suffer the most and oftentimes either shut down or become disruptive. And that is never the answer. So we need to figure out how to fund special education better and to explain it to the public so they understand. Because yes, our special education numbers are very high in this district. I think we need to look at that process too. We have more special education students on IEPs than I think some comparable districts. And I think we should take a hard look at that to see why and to see if there's something we're not doing that could address and reduce this number of special education IEPs going out.
Thanks. You mentioned the word inclusion, and so the district's approach to inclusion, including the variable programs, the available programs and support structures in each of the schools, varies considerably, kind of as you alluded to. What role should the school committee play in bringing greater uniformity, or should it, across the district? And then how would you define success in terms of inclusion?
Well, first of all, the school committee really doesn't have any jurisdiction in trying to address how the administration is servicing students, whether it's special education or general education. That's the purview of the administration. What the school committee can do, though, is manage the budget. And we should be asking those hard questions that we mentioned earlier. Why is our numbers going up? Is the cost being used? Is the price we're paying effectively being used? What do the special education teachers suggest we do? Those kind of forums, I think, are something the district doesn't do. And I think having open forums with the teachers would be able to provide some very clear understanding of where some of the problems are. Having worked at Glover, I know from working with all the special education teachers, both in the programs and the inclusion teachers, I got an earful every day about what needs to be done. So I think we need to open up our discussions to include them in these forums.
Thanks, Brian. What steps do you think the district can take or even should take to broaden the services in town to potentially reduce the number of out-of-district placements each year?
Well, most of the out-of-district placements I have participated in when I was at Glover and Village were definitely students that needed services that were beyond our capabilities. As far as the others go, I mean, it really depends on why they're going out. We'd have to take a hard look at each one of them and analyze it every year. I mean, that should be something that's done so that we understand if we're being effective or not with these kids. I think we have to look at where the programs are not providing enough that we can keep them in the district and perhaps look at, I mean, that's why we created some of these programs in the schools, was to retain the students rather than sending them out. The cost of sending a student outside the district is expensive. And that kind of money, if we could put it into the right specialists to help these kids within the buildings, could eventually save us a lot of money in the long term.
Thanks, Brian. So we've talked about a lot of the challenges that you would face on the school committee. What would you say are your special education priorities, and how do you plan on advocating for them?
Well, again, I think that we need to start looking at how the money is being spent, where the support is not being provided enough that the students can be successful. I think that's the key right there. We have to really take a hard look at how all those dollars are being spent and then what we can do to improve it. I mean, everything can always take improvement. And, having worked in the buildings, I really think that there's much that could be done to start looking at why. I mean, when I was at Glover, we had at one point 4 ASD programs, and we had tons of support staff and everything. But one of the things that we didn't do was pay the support staff adequate money. They got paid under minimum wage. Now, how can you get quality people to work with these kids if we're paying them less than McDonald's? I mean, you can go work at McDonald's, Stop and Shop, or any of those places and make more money than our aides made. And these are people who were doing specialized work with the special ed kids that really needed it. And we were always running out of people. We couldn't hire people. Those are the kind of roadblocks that prevent us from providing the services that kids with severe disabilities really require.
Ryan, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Before we close out, anything you want to share with the audience?
Well, just the fact that I've been in the buildings, I know the teachers, I know the programs, at least on the elementary side, from my experience at Marblehead. I worked in middle schools before, so I know those needs too, but in different districts. And I think that my insights and my ability to understand what teachers are going through, and staff and parents, and students, I think I can bring a lot to the table that you won't find in other candidates.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.